Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're looking into a community that, well, it sparks a lot of curiosity for many people, including you, I bet, the Amish.
That's right. We want to go a bit deeper than the usual surface level stuff.
Yeah, we're going to explore how they approach some really big life moments: marriage, pregnancy, and childbirth.
And we're doing this through a particular lens, bringing together perspectives from Christian history and also, psychology, thinking about community and development.
We've drawn on quite a range of sources, haven't we? Historical accounts, sociological studies.
Exactly. The goal is really to give you, our listener, a richer, more nuanced picture of these significant life stages in the Amish community.
Okay, so let's dive in with marriage, where life together often starts. Our sources suggest Amish folks tend to marry, well, pretty young, right? Early 20s?
Where that's generally true. Women often around 20 to 22, men maybe 21 to 23. And that is noticeably younger than the broader American average.
It really is. So why is that, do you think, from that psychological angle?
Well, it often follows that period called Rumspringa, a time for sort of exploration and then baptism, which is a serious commitment to the faith and community.
Oh, okay.
So marriage tends to come fairly soon after that. It's, a key marker of becoming a full adult member of the community.
And doesn't their education play a role? Finishing formal schooling after 8th grade.
Absolutely. That's a huge factor. It means they typically enter the workforce much earlier, gain economic independence sooner than, say, someone going to college for years.
Right. So establishing a household feels like a more immediate next step, maybe.
Precisely. And you have to remember the context, the incredibly strong family and community support. Young couples aren't just left adrift.
There's a real safety net there.
A very strong one. Shared responsibility, practical help, it's all built in.
But it's interesting, you mentioned it's generally younger. Sources also say the average age has crept up a bit over the last century.
It has, yes. Slowly. Mirroring wider trends, but, to a much lesser degree. It shows that even within a very traditional group, things aren't completely static.
So there's still some individual variation, some flexibility.
Definitely. It likely reflects adjustments to economic changes, maybe subtle shifts in social expectations within their own communities. It's that balance between tradition and, reality.
Okay, so courtship usually starts after baptism, mostly within the faith community. And the weddings themselves sound very community-focused, often simple ceremonies at home.
Exactly. The focus is squarely on the spiritual commitment and the community celebrating together, not on, lavish displays. It fits perfectly with their values of humility and togetherness.
And what about that grosdaughty house or dowdy house custom, living with the bride's parents for the first year? And that sounds intense.
I know. It might seem that way to outsiders, but psychologically, think about it. That first year of marriage is a massive adjustment. Living with her parents provides instant support help around the house, maybe childcare later, advice from experienced hands. It probably smooths out a lot of the initial bumps.
Makes sense. Now, a really core aspect is their stance on divorce. Very strongly discouraged, right?
Extremely. Marriage is viewed as a sacred, lifelong bond ordained by God. Separation might happen in really severe cases, but remarriage is generally off the table.
That's a profound commitment.
It is. And you can see echoes of early Christian teachings there about the permanence of marriage. Psychologically, this creates incredible stability for families and the community as a whole.
Although I suppose it could be difficult in unhappy situations.
So that's the potential downside, yes. Sources hint at that complexity. But the primary focus is on commitment and stability.
And central to maintaining their identity is marrying within the community, right? Not dating or marrying English or non-Amish people.
Absolutely vital. It's rooted in biblical ideas like not being unequally yoked, but practically it ensures cultural and religious continuity.
Keeps the traditions alive across generations.
Precisely. While it's not absolutely unheard of for an outsider to do the church and then marry in, it's very much the exception, not the rule.
Okay, let's shift gears to pregnancy. It sounds like it's viewed very positively as a blessing.
Yes, very much so. Directly linked to the biblical idea to be fruitful and multiply. This perspective naturally contributes to often larger families.
And psychologically, that positive framing must be beneficial. Plus the community support.
Oh, definitely. Having that shared cultural value and the practical support network around expectant mothers can be a huge source of well-being, reducing potential isolation.
Yet there's also this element of modesty, keeping the pregnancy fairly private, especially early on. How did those fit together?
It reflects their broader cultural emphasis on humility and maybe a more inward focus compared to how pregnancy is often announced and displayed in mainstream culture. It's less about the individual announcement and more about the anticipated blessing for the family and community.
What about prenatal care? It seems like there's some variation there.
There is, you see a blend. Some really prefer traditional methods, relying on midwives within the community.
Uh-huh.
But many others do engage with modern medicine to some extent. One study suggested something like 73% get at least some antenatal care.
So it's not a complete rejection of modern healthcare, more like selective use.
Exactly. It shows a kind of pragmatism. They value their traditional ways, but they also recognize the benefits modern care can offer for the health of mother and baby.
And nutrition probably follows their usual patterns. Homegrown food, less processed.
Pretty much a simple, wholesome diet. And yes, there are likely traditional dietary recommendations passed down, things believed to support a healthy pregnancy within their own framework.
It's all very intertwined with their faith and lifestyle.
Deeply.
Okay, so then we get to the birth itself. Traditionally, home births were the norm.
Yes, attended by midwives or experienced women from the community. This fits perfectly with their desire for separation from the world and a preference for natural processes.
And psychologically, being at home, surrounded by familiar faces, that must feel very secure.
Immensely so, I would imagine. Comfort, security, a sense of control in a familiar setting. It's a very different psychological space than a hospital.
But you mentioned shifts earlier. Are more choosing hospitals now?
In some communities, yes. There seems to be a growing awareness of potential complications and the safety net that hospital care provides if needed.
But even in a hospital, the preference is for minimal intervention.
That seems to be the case. They still value the natural process, patience, avoiding interventions unless truly medically necessary. It's about finding a balance between their values and modern safety nets.
And during labor, who's typically there?
Support usually comes from the husband, female relatives, mothers, sisters, and often a midwife or perhaps a doula figure. The atmosphere is often described as quiet, calm, even prayerful.
A very supportive, community-based experience.
Yes, it emphasizes the emotional and spiritual aspects just as much as the physical. Pain management often relies on natural methods first, though medical options might be accepted in a hospital if things get difficult.
It really highlights that theme of continuity, but also adaptation over time.
Definitely. And it's important to remember there's diversity between Amish communities, too. Practices aren't uniform everywhere.
Good point. Now, what about birth control and family planning? The traditional view leans against artificial methods.
That's the general understanding, yes. Stemming from that interpretation of be fruitful and multiply and seeing children as blessings from God.
Which obviously connects to the larger family sizes we often associate with the Amish.
It does. And psychologically, that openness to children reinforces community continuity, that sense of purpose flowing through generations.
But is it absolute? Are natural methods ever used?
Sources suggest some couples might practice natural family planning, like the rhythm method. It's not a completely monolithic stance.
In family size itself, are practical things, like economics, ever a factor?
Yeah.
Children used to be economic assets on farms. Less so now, maybe.
That's a really interesting point. Practical considerations certainly play a role, and we do see hints of a gradual decrease in average family size in some areas over time.
So maybe economic shifts or awareness of maternal health are subtly influencing things.
It's quite possible. Again, it shows that interplay between core beliefs and the lived realities. Their approach is deeply tied to their whole worldview, but it's not immune to practical pressures.
Okay, briefly then, menstruation. This is handled very privately, I gather.
Yes, consistent with their overall emphasis on modesty. It's considered a private, personal matter.
And the typical approach involves reusable cloth pads.
Traditionally, yes. That aligns perfectly with their values of simplicity, self-sufficiency, and being frugal. There's usually intergenerational teaching on how to make and care for them.
Is there any flexibility, maybe using modern products sometimes?
Potentially, especially in more progressive communities, or maybe for women working outside the home. But the underlying principle of modesty would still be very important. Education about it usually comes from mothers or older sisters, focusing on the practicalities.
Right. Now, one really visible aspect is clothing, especially during pregnancy. What's the significance there?
Well, Amish clothing in general is Hugely significant, isn't it? It signals separation from the world, commitment to the community, humility.
Rejecting individualism.
Exactly. And during pregnancy and postpartum, women often wear a specific blue dress, sometimes called a maternity or mother's dress.
Blue. Any reason for that color?
It's often associated with heavenly virtues, sometimes linked symbolically to the Virgin Mary, though the exact reasons might vary or just be tradition. The dress itself is practically designed looser, comfortable, modest.
And it visually identifies the woman's status.
Yes, it signals to the community that she's expecting or has recently given birth, likely cueing that network of support we talked about. It can almost be seen as a kind of rite of passage.
Sometimes paired with a white apron, too.
Often, yes, especially around the time of birth. White symbolizing purity, new life, perhaps. Sometimes there's even a special, simple gown used just for the delivery itself, for modesty and practicality.
So the clothing isn't just practical. It's woven into the whole cultural and spiritual meaning of this time.
Absolutely. It's a holistic approach, connecting the physical, social, and spiritual.
You mentioned earlier how some of these practices echo early Christian teachings. Can you expand on that a bit?
Sure. If you look at the early church fathers, they strongly emphasize marital fidelity and condemn divorce. Tertullian, for instance, saw marriage as reflecting Christ and the church. That finds a clear parallel in the Amish view on divorce.
The lifelong commitment idea.
Precisely. And the view of childbirth as a blessing, encouraging families, that resonates with Genesis, but was also stressed by figures like Clement of Alexandria, who also emphasized raising children in the faith.
Which is obviously central to Amish family life and how they handle education.
Exactly. So from a historical perspective, you see these strong thematic parallels. And psychologically, these long-held teachings provide a powerful framework for stable family life, giving it structure and purpose.
So wrapping this up, it's really striking how interconnected everything is for the Amish. Marriage, pregnancy, birth, all deeply tied to their faith, community values, their whole way of being.
It really is a holistic system, and what I find particularly interesting is seeing both the deep roots in tradition, echoing early Christianity, but also that quiet adaptation. It's not frozen in time.
Yeah, the slight shifts in marriage age, the selective use of modern medicine.
Right. It shows a living tradition, not just a historical reenactment. And the variation between different Amish groups is also key.
It definitely makes you think, doesn't it,
Right.
about how much our own cultural or religious backgrounds shape how we experience these universal life events, marriage, having children.
Absolutely. And maybe it prompts a little reflection for you, our listener, on that balance between tradition and change in any close-knit community, including perhaps your own.
It's a fascinating window into a different way of approaching these fundamental transitions.
Hopefully this deep dive encourages continued curiosity and respect for the diverse ways people navigate family and life.